Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I'm going to be sharing with you a brand new secret weapon that you can use against the French defense. This is an attempt to make the Orthoschnapp Gambit even better, and it's going to be this really funny queen check on move 4. But before we can get into that, I just need to say one thing. This is my first video on my new computer, so this is a little bit of a test run. I'm going to be doing this recording. Not sure if everything's going to be 100% perfect. Lighting is going to improve in the future. Video quality is going to improve. I've changed the board to orange. I don't know. Let me know how you feel about that. I just decided this is maybe a little bit more traditional. I don't know. Let me know. If you don't like it, I'll change it back. We got a lot to figure out. But today we're going to be kicking this off straight away. We're going to jump right into the action. We are talking about the new Orthoschnapp Gambit. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the Orthoschnapp in general, this is something you can play against the French defense. After e4, e6, you play pawn to c4, and the idea is after d5, you take once on d5 with your c-pawn, and after black recaptures, the Orthoschnapp begins with this move queen to b3, and the main underlying point of this opening is that when black does recapture on e4, you can sacrifice a pawn, bring your bishop to c4, and immediately begin to put as much pressure as possible on f7, which means black is going to need to solve a lot of problems early on. And I've made a lot of videos covering the Orthoschnapp. It's still one of my favorites and still something that I intend on playing quite a bit, but there's also this new thing that's kind of caught my attention, and it's you get back to this exact position, you play e4 and c4, you take, and when they take back, instead of playing queen to b3 in one move, what if you attempt to play queen to a4? And this is going to be something that can lead to some slightly different positions that you might not be as familiar with. But the idea of queen to a4 is to provoke this bishop to go to d7, which is in fact the most common move, and this is also the top computer engine's choice, bishop to d7, attacking the queen, getting out of check. And the point here is to go back to b3, and all of a sudden, you're attacking both of these pawns. And what you're saying is, this is exactly the Orthoschnapp Gambit. Like, if you take here, I'm playing bishop to c4, we are playing an Orthoschnapp Gambit, only you've brought your bishop out to d7, which we can argue is not a benefit to black, because you're in the way of all of your pieces, but also importantly, you've undefended your b-pawn. So this is what we're going to be exploring today. We're going to be checking out this opening, and this is actually the main way that black will continue. They will take your pawn, you'll play bishop to c4. Note here in this position that when you get here, there's a couple different moves for black. We'll be exploring bishop to c6. This is a very common way. This is actually probably the most popular way for black to continue, but there's also the critical line of just simply taking the pawn. And this is where we're going to begin our investigation, and I just want to caution you with the white pieces against immediately grabbing this b-pawn. The whole point of the gambit is not to grab the b-pawn, try to get your pawn back. This would just allow black to play knight to c6 and be able to develop some sort of initiative very quickly. Like, the point is not to try to grab the b-pawn. The point is to play bishop to c4, play like it's an Orthoschnapp Gambit, only you've got the opponent to commit to bishop to d7, and you want to do the same thing. You want to attack the f-pawn, and this is the position where most people will immediately make a mistake, and already you might be able to win quite a lot of games just from this position, because the most common move is queen to e7, and this is a huge losing mistake by black, and we are just easily winning now with the white pieces. But queen to e7 is as natural as it gets. The queen comes out, defends the pawn, looks like everything is going well, and black may have even figured out that if you now take on b7, that they have a way to defend their rook. And maybe black got to here and said, you know what? No sweat, bishop to c6, I defend my rook. What could be the problem here? Well, it turns out that the fact that the queen has actually left the back rank is a major issue for the opponents, because now our queen will sneak in to the c8 square, and all of a sudden, black is just in incredible trouble. Like, black is just simply losing. If you got to go back with the queen, we have a little bit of a tactic here, and it's the focal point for every single tactic in this opening has always been the f7 square. So boom, bishop takes f7. This is the winning move for white. If you do take, obviously you are just losing your queen, so you would expect a lot of people to bong cloud, play king to e7, trying to keep it all together. But guess what? Get checkmated, queen to e6. This is how a couple different games have already gone on Lichess. This is a trap that a lot of people might fall for. So something like this just simply wins on the spot. So incredible stuff. This is one of the things that you can try to hope for. Now let's come back to queen to e4, and let's try to see what happens if black plays bishop to d7, but then defends a little bit better. What does the computer say? What's like the real line here? Well, It starts with queen to b3, okay, poke, poke, and if you do decide to grab, which again is the most critical way, we will play bishop to c4 and attack your f7 pawn yet again. Now, what is black meant to play? Well, there's actually only one move that the computer will give an advantage to, and again, it's very similar to the Orthoschnapp, where like, even when the computer says black has an advantage, usually it requires like really abstract moves. And maybe this first move is not the most like outlandish thing of all time, but it's queen to f6. And we'll see, we'll look at this line a little bit because it's something that I think it's more important to kind of understand the general ideas and what's really going on in the position than it is to focus on the little tiny ridiculous computer-like moves that black might play. If you're playing super GMs, okay, maybe stay away from this dubious opening. But if you're playing this at the club level, this is, and your opponent finds queen to f6, first of all, kudos to your opponent for finding this move. But now, let's just check this out and let's try to get a good feel for how things might end up going favorably for us with the white pieces. Well, now we are going to be taking on b7. And this is very similar to the last position, only there's a difference as to where the queen is. And this will play an integral role because black is not trying to play this move. Because again, we sneak in, no big deal. This would be good for white. So what was the point of queen to f6? Well, the idea was queen to c6, and this is how black decides to defend the rook, and in this way we are no longer threatening to go here. The bishop is the garter of our little invasion on the queen side. Now, this is where things get a little bit weird, a little bit wacky, because when I'm looking at this, I'm a human being. I'm saying we're playing for some sort of attack. I'm going to be playing queen to b3. Like, that's my move. I'm a human. Now, computers will give some just like nonsense. They're like, just take this. And then when they take back, play like here, and then black for some reason will play like h5, you play b3. Like none of the lines ever make sense, but you're perfectly welcome if you want to go and explore it. But me, to my mind, you know what? I'm keeping the queens on the board, and I think this maybe is a little bit more interesting, more practical way of continuing with the white pieces, and you almost in a way want to argue that the queen is a little bit misplaced on c6. Like, this certainly is the square where potentially the knight wants to go to, and again, we've just made another threat of attacking the f7 pawn. So what might black do here? Well, logical to me would be bishop to e6. This seems like a very normal way for black to continue, and this even sets up a little trap that we need to be perfectly aware of. You need to avoid taking this bishop. This is the one thing that you need to have on the radar if your opponent somehow finds this line, because the bishop on c1 has just fallen off the board, and we are going to be losing this game. So what do we do about this? We need to protect our bishop. We need to develop our pieces. We play knight to a3, and we get a position like this. And even here, like, I feel like in practical play, this is something that might lend itself to being a good position for white, because after this recapture, we take back, and then we now get to the position where computer will say this is like -1 if black finds the right move. So if you're going to be playing people that find all the best moves here, maybe you're a little bit out of luck, because the best move is knight to d7, which, I don't know, to me doesn't strike as the most normal, natural move that you could possibly play. But let's also take just a second here to try to come to terms with what is happening, because I think it's a little bit more important to just kind of understand this position, what the problems are for both sides. And it's kind of this weird, interesting battle of both of these knights being kind of locked out of the game. We would love to be able to play knight to f3. Unfortunately, there's a pawn here. This knight would love to go to c6. Unfortunately, there's a queen there. So we've both kind of have these self-made problems that we've set for ourselves. We also, at some point, though, have ideas of putting this knight on e5. This would attack the queen. This would attack f7 again. And if the queen moves away from the b7 square, potentially we'll be able to invade with our queen. So this is all the kind of stuff that is going on. And in addition, potentially in some endgame, we could end up with the better pawn structure. Like, let's just say black plays a normal move. Black plays knight to f6. One of the things that we might be able to do here is actually play this move pawn to d4. This will let us get our bishop into the game. But more importantly, we're also trying to get this knight out. So if the opponent does decide to take on passant, we now will be playing knight to f3. And this gives us access to this square, puts the knight on the most logical square, doesn't let black take our g-pawn. We're ready to get castled. So if we were to get a position like this would be kind of just both sides, just developing pieces like normal. Well, all of a sudden, white might end up with a very good position. Now, This pawn is very weak. We've sacrificed this, so we probably want to win the d pawn back at some point. At some point, this knight is going to be heading over to the e5 square. But if you also look at the pawn structure, we have some potential for some sort of advantage, because at some point, we're putting as much pressure on the d and c files as possible. So something like this, I believe, has a lot of promise for white. Obviously, there's a lot of different ways that this could possibly go, and this queen f6 line is a little bit rarer, but I just kind of want to point out that kind of interesting middle game on the radar. Now, let's back up and look at one more very critical line in this position. After we get back to our main starting point, after queen to a4 check, when the opponent plays bishop to d7 and we hop back, there is yet another line. Like, this is obviously one of the most critical ways for black to contest this position, but the most common way makes a lot of sense. Like, if you've never seen this position before with the black pieces, bishop to c6 makes a ton of sense. Like, you're defending this pawn, you're keeping this guy extra defended, black is getting a little bit closer to taking this e-pawn. It looks like a very solid choice by black, who's going to try to argue that the queen doesn't make a lot of sense on b3 if we're not taking this pawn. That's all fair enough. But now, this is where we have the surprising possibility of transposing into an opening that is also super rare and most opponents will just simply not know. And you can do it by this move, pawn to d4. And I'm going to show you what this other crazy opening is that you also might want to play if you want to add any of these tricks into your repertoire. Because now, after d takes e4, okay, we've sacked this pawn again. We are yet again playing bishop to c4. And remember this position? You can get this via a completely different opening called the McLeod attack. So if you want to play the same exact stuff, but against e4, e5 openings, you might want to consider c3. This is the McLeod attack. Almost nobody knows about it. Nobody plays this one. But after d5, you can play queen to a4, a rare move within this already super rare opening. And now if the bishop goes to d7, which is very logical, queen to b3, and maybe you're starting to see how we could end up in this position. Now, if the bishop does go to c6, as it did in our opening, d4. If they take our d-pawn, we can take back, and if they take here, bishop to c4. This is how you can get this from the e4, e5 openings. Now, just to remind you, so that we're not getting confused how we got there via the French defense move order, we played queen to a4 in this position. We dropped back, and we're looking at the bishop to c6 line. Now, after pawn to d4, most opponents here will be taking this with black, and we will be developing our bishop to c4. This is the way that we will continue, always putting as much pressure on this pawn as possible. Now, here is yet again another position where I don't know why, but most players just simply mess up and just fall for like an absolutely easy tactic. And I've had this position several times, and at least 3 titled players have played queen to d7 against me. Like, really strong players, they go for this, and it looks logical. You develop the queen is defending the f7 square, but now we're just have a winning move with white, and it's not even that hard to find, because I think black is like, okay, I get the point. You have one threat. Well, joke's on you. We had 2 threats, and our threat was pawn to d5, just trapping the bishop in. So this is something that black needs to be aware of, because the pawn goes to d5 in a lot of these positions, and even if the bishop does have a safe square to move to, we're going to be winning this pawn. So most of my games go bishop to a4, okay, whatever, attack my queen, I take your b pawn, and this is usually where people are resigning. So I've actually won quite a lot of games just with this line, because this is something that occurs. We're just attacking this rook, bishop is kind of dumb and probably also still getting trapped, and black just loses all of the material on the queen side. So this is already a fantastic thing. So you get back here, you get to this position, and what should black actually play? Well, black should be playing queen to e7. And if you are familiar with the Orthoschnapp, this is a much more common square for the queen. And even though it looks a little bit weird because you're blocking in the bishop, you're blocking in the knight, it's not quite where people want to be. It does have one extra idea, and that idea is, like, let's say, for example, we played pawn to d5 here. The power of this battery is that black actually might be able to swap off queens. This is kind of what I was talking about. If your d-pawn is moved, and that means this is going to be check, black always wants to make this queen trade. That'll alleviate a lot of the pressure that black is under and get rid of this problem, which is that the queen is kind of on this silly square. So in order to avoid that, the best way to continue is with knight to c3. And now you have prevented black from going here because you're on this f-pawn. So something like this, which also for some reason I've seen this kind of thing happen a lot of times, could lead to some wins for whites. But now we play knight to c3. We're trying to play pawn to d5, and I've actually analyzed this in a previous video where I think I called this like but it was via a transposition from the McLeod attack. It's via this is like the most complicated gambit of all time. Now, if you ask a computer, like, this is fine. Black can totally play like this. All you got to do is find like a series of stockfish moves. It's not like a really big deal. All you got to do is figure out how to solve d5, and there's one solution. And all Black needs to do is play like 8 stockfish moves in a row, and then they should be doing just fine. And I do try to test you. If you haven't seen it, I'll leave a link to the video if you want to go see all the details. But this is just not an easy position for Black to figure it out, because you have to come up with knight to d7, with the idea that if you play pawn to d5, trapping the bishop, Black will escape with this move, knight to c5, protecting kind of everything, hopping into this square. And this is the way that Black might somehow be able to get an advantage. But it's still not over yet, because you could drop the queen back, the knight will hop in, you're popping over here. I've already analyzed all of this, so I'm going to kind of speed through it. This is a speed run. This is the reminder. You didn't think this would be on the test. You watched that other video of the most complicated gambit. You didn't think you would need to remember it. You didn't think, but it's always on the final exam. What does Black do here? It looks like a bunch of horrible stuff is happening. Nah. You have queen to b4, obviously, leaving this guy hanging and making a counterattack on the bishop. Not the most intuitive move. Not sure how many actual human opponents would find it. But now you play pawn to b3, and this is how White can defend this pawn. And now, of course, Black has 2 moves. This is the funny one that was in the thumbnail. You could obviously play bishop to a4. How many of your opponents are going to find that one? With the point that if you take with the pawn, the bishop has become undefended. And if you take with the knight, checkmate, get wrecked. That's something that needs to be avoided. But the strongest move here for Black, pawn to b5. Obviously, all of this is very obvious, very normal. Oh, this is attacked, no problem. I develop a piece. I play bishop to d2. And after this recapture, I take on e4, attacking the queen. All of this gets kind of wild, out of control stuff. But you get to some sort of position where eventually, like, we probably don't lose our knight. We probably take this way. We get to some sort of position like this. And, this is one of the most complicated things that could ever happen. Obviously, it's the opponent that needs to find out all of these complicated solutions. And we're a little bit worse because our king's on f1 compared to the opponent's king. But honestly, this feels like we still might have a very fair fight ahead of us. So I don't know. This is the new Orthoschnapp Gambit. Let me know. Would you play queen to a4? Do you still play queen to b3? Will you not play any of this? I don't really care. Just let me know in the comments, and I hope you enjoy it. I hope you enjoy my new computer. Let me know about the setup. All right, bye.